Hey everybody, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, and actually, lately I guess I've been doing more of the Consummate Athlete thing than I've been writing about it, because it's been a really packed few weeks for me.
And I'm Peter Glassford. I am a registered kinesiologist and an endurance coach, and I've been sitting in the same square, 500 square feet most days for the last little bit.
I think this is actually great because we have a couple questions today that are about training as a couple and stuff, and I feel like we're in a very big role reversal right now because I'm actually coaching a training camp and you're at home doing more computer work. So this is very counter to what we normally do.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yeah, I think it does relate to our main question of the day for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been good. It's not that I'm inactive. I've been running and got some cross-country skiing in and riding the trainer and swearing at my trainer. So then I'm going running more because it's much simpler.
I feel like you're just slowly going down this rabbit hole of just like, first it's you don't really like Zwift overly much. Now you don't like the trainer overly much. Pretty soon, you're not going to like disc brakes very much. You're just going to go back to one of those, 1960s bikes with down tube shifting and...
just like a single speed or something, like one of the old flip-flop hubs or something. Yeah. I don't know. There's something to be... I think that's why I like walking. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just like, you don't even really need shoes. You can just you could basically just be out in the forest and you can just go for a walk anytime you want.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I have to say, I'm going to throw a shout out to our friend Jody, who is from our town, but is actually currently in the town that I'm in. He's actually kind of taken up walking since he got here, and he listens to this podcast often while he's walking, and he says it's really, like, adding walking to his routine has completely changed him as an athlete. So, again...
Well, and he's gotten over a knee injury similar, I don't know if it's similar to you, but he had a knee injury.
Walking.
So
it's the new
hopefully
big
that
thing.
Helped. That and the monotonous sound of my voice hopefully was soothing for that.
We apologize for that. So I'm actually in Girona, Spain for a training camp with a bunch of really awesome juniors and U23 athletes from Ontario. So I've been... riding with some really rad girls and guys. Lots of really fun stops. The pastries here are just insane. So a lot of croissants, which is great for the fueling. I'm just having a blast. This is one place where normally I kind of start counting down the days till a training camp ends. But this one, I'm like, we could extend it. I could stay here another 5 weeks and keep doing this.
Fair enough. Well, I've been trying to keep things together here at the homestead. That's fine. So where did you, did you have any current events for the listeners and what you're up to or what's coming up?
We've still got just Shred Girls stuff coming up. I guess by the time this episode's out, I'll have sent out a Shred Girls newsletter with sort of all of the upcoming dates from the Shred Girls launch party at Joyride 150 near Toronto to the training camp for Shred Girls that you and I are hosting up in Singhampton, Ontario, mid-May. So if you want to get all the details on them, plus a bunch of other events, including ones in New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania, if you head over to shred-girls.com, you can subscribe to the newsletter and kind of keep up with all of that stuff. And of course, there's still pre-orders going on. The book is out in, 2.5 months now, and I'm getting super excited.
Where are we? There's a post. I'm asking this, and then also hopefully we're gonna sort of educate the listener, I guess, to what we're thinking. But with the Shred Girls camp, we have a post up on Shred Girls about what it is and sort of that sort of stuff, and there's sort of a form to express interest. So they can find that. I'll link to that in the show notes. But what are we thinking with that? What's sort of the age group for this Shred Girls camp?
Yeah, so it's sort of that early teens, I think 12 to 15, and it's just going to be a really sweet 3-day camp where we're going to, do a bunch of roads, some gravel, some fun riding, and just kind of get into the how to train sort of thing. So it's for people who aren't, girls who haven't necessarily been on any of these kind of projects like the one that I'm coaching right now, who haven't had that opportunity yet. So it's kind of almost a here's what it's going to look like if you actually do get to go on one of these, and here's how you can prepare. So, maybe next year you'll be on one of these with me in February. So it's just going to be a really fun few days. We're going to ride, we're going to talk nutrition, we're going to stretch, we're going to do yoga, we're going to do core. It's going to be rad.
Yeah, and so I think that like train to train or learn to train is sort of the perfect way to describe that. And I think indeed, you know, it's if someone's got a little bit of cycling history and they sort of want to take it more seriously, maybe have some goals, or like you say, they want to get onto sort of that curve with the camps and stuff. I think that's our goal. And it's certainly if someone has a coach already and they're, you know, just looking to get some more face-to-face time with someone, like myself or Molly, then that's sort of the idea, right? We're not necessarily looking to coach any of these younger folks. We're just trying to really up the level and sort of increase the pool. So,
yeah, exactly.
As Molly says, they're usually super fun. We've done similar with Ellen and the Quest, which we're doing in March. But that's all full, so you can't apply for that. But this is sort of the what we call the funnel.
Yeah,
trying to build a funnel. So that's that. So we'll put links to shred-girls.com. I'm trying to think if I have anything going on. Not really. Lots of plans. Thank you for that, and anyone who's come from the podcast and stuff, and some good phone consults, just talking to people about getting ready for big adventures. So yeah, keep it coming, and you can certainly connect that way or through the podcast at consummateathlete.com, and keep sending these questions, which we're going to get to.
Yeah, Peter, do you have a one thing this week? I forgot to preemptively ask you that, so I feel like I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but...
Yeah, geez, I had something, and I'm trying to think what it was. Do you have one on tap?
Oh, man. Actually, I kind of do. I'll have to put the exact model in the show notes, but as anyone who follows me on the internet knows, I have a very wide toe box for the fact that I have very narrow feet. This is partially because I run in barefoot shoes a lot of the time. So I have a really hard time finding cycling shoes that fit, and I think the number of times that I've put out like call outs for like, does anyone know a shoe with a wide toe box, is I've probably asked 15 times. And I finally got a pair of Shimano mountain bike shoes. I want to say MX women's. I will make sure I'm right and put that in the show notes, but they have been awesome this camp. I got them 3 weeks ago now, and I didn't want to say anything about them in the last couple episodes because I wanted to put them through the paces, but man, they are so comfortable. It is ridiculous. So I've been so happy with them. So that's my one thing.
And for our Canadian listeners, that's Shimano.
Yes.
But, yeah. That will spark wild debate, I'm sure. So I don't know. I don't really have. I don't know if I have one. I mean, I've been using. Was my last thing a coffee thing? I'm trying to think.
It definitely was.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked hot beverages last time too.
Yeah, I don't know. I lacrosse ball. I'll just use lacrosse ball. I feel like I've used mobility stuff too, but I'm back home to all my mobility toys.
Just doing hours of mobility. I've actually been foam rolling with a wine bottle here.
Oh, you're back to that game. You should have brought one of the mobility toys.
I know.
But I saw Jeremy Powers today. He had like a rock in his knee, which is crazy. And so I wanted to send him a picture of the bump in my knee and see if he could get his doctor to say that I had a rock in my knee, so he could get that thing lanced out of there. But I've had it for not 10 years, but not far off probably.
Crazy.
This like bump in this scar above my left knee. I think it's mostly like scar tissue. But anyhow, my left knee has been like clicking all of a sudden, really for no reason. So I think
I think it is. I think it's like when a woman is pregnant and her husband starts getting like pregnancy symptoms. I think it's because my knee has been all weird for the last couple months. So you're just getting like phantom knee symptoms. It's really sweet.
Maybe as you say, our training patterns are crossing over and we're both like having like some sort of injuries related to that or something.
If anyone is an expert in this field of couples training, which actually like dovetails beautifully into our first question, we would love to have you on, so hit us up, because I feel like now I'm like, wait, we have a lot of questions about couples and how they train. So yeah, if you're a psychologist who's into that, let us know.
Yeah, I mean, all I was going to say, though, was I don't want to harp on my one thing, but, just trying to spend time, especially when Molly's not here, it's way easier, actually. But, I'll sit, we have a yoga mat and, like, some low tables and stuff, so, like, I'll sit and eat, or if I'm just, like, doing nothing on my phone, like, I'll sit and roll on my knee, or even just, like, cross my legs and sit on the floor in different ways on the mat. watching Netflix or whatever. Like there's lots of time in the day when you can fit it in. So I would say that's my one thing this week is just trying to fit that in. And while I do have some time and stuff here in the house and I'm stuck in Canadian winter, just trying to get on top of that, right? We all have our little clicks and pains and tightness and everything else. So just a reminder, you can sort of fit that in and it doesn't take more than maybe a yoga mat or a lacrosse ball.
Perfect. Well,
which one do you want to do first here? Do you want to start with the big one or the easy one?
I think let's start with the shorter one, because I think they're similar, but they're not quite the same question. So our first question is from our good friend asking about how a couple can train for big events at the same time. And man, is this one that you and I had to learn when we trained for Ironman 2 years ago.
Right. So I think we're starting with the big one, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Technically it's a short one. See, this is already the problem. We're already getting into...
we're arguing about the couples question. Perfect. So we definitely, the Ironman, I didn't even think about that. That's a great example. So how did we handle that?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, and I'll say this is maybe more of like the female side of things, is like I had to kind of realize that your training and my training weren't going to be the same. I wasn't always going to be able to be on the same ride with you. We weren't always going to do the same run. Even though you're doing the same event, your training isn't necessarily the same. Like Peter can handle a much bigger bike volume than I can. I can actually handle probably a higher run volume than he can. Swimming for me wasn't a huge priority. Peter needed to learn how to swim. We just had, different needs and different things that we needed to work on. So I think the first thing we needed to kind of get over was, even though the event was the exact same, we'd both be on the start line together. We were next to each other at the start line. Our training wasn't always going to be the same, and that was okay. And it was really hard for me on days where Peter would have longer days and I'd be really bitter and kind of freaking out that I wasn't doing enough, but I was doing what was right for me. It didn't really matter that he was doing 15, 20 more miles. It's super arbitrary to think that your training has to align perfectly with your partner, even for the same event.
Yeah, I mean, different people, right? And then often different goals, right? Mm-hmm. Like this was my first and only Ironman. This was your second, and I mean, you had goals of doing it and not being completely wrecked, which were similar to my goals in some way. But I also wanted to not die in the swim.
Very important, yes.
And then it layered on that, I think even related to last week's podcast with David, there's some similar elements. Both of us had that Ironman, yes, but then also that was a single event within our lives, our seasons. So I raced mountain bike nationals the weekend before, which was also very important and also completely different event. So there was a lot of variables around that, right? Whereas I'm trying to remember even what your season looked like that year, because we're 2 or 3 out. I don't think you were doing a ton.
No, not a ton. But I also enjoy running more than trail running more than I enjoy running on the road or running or even riding, to be honest, at that point. So
right.
Getting in more, I wanted to have more run volume. Even though that didn't necessarily line up with doing particularly great in Ironman, just training for mountain bike nationals is not really what you do to do well in Ironman. So we definitely had differing goals and things that we needed to focus on outside of that race too.
Right. So there's the physiology, there's the training. So we both had to get to sort of a similar objective, but we both had to do different things physiologically and from a just even skill perspective. Mm-hmm. But then I think also this question, so I mean, I'm trying to think how we hash through, because there's sort of 2 questions. Let's start with at the top. So there's also we had to exist as a couple while we were doing this training, which is time consuming. And then also traveling to the event. But I think the bigger question is, in those lead up months, how do you exist, right? And this may have to move beyond even us, I guess, too. But there's things at home that need to be done. There's obviously spend time together, that sort of stuff, right? While there's this Ironman training, especially, but any of these big races like Leadville and stuff, right? They're pretty all-encompassing, especially as you get closer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think having pretty frank discussions about like who's doing what and stuff, because I know, like, let's be honest, you're definitely cleaner than I am. So like,
Oh, good. Because when I was talking to my
I
one
think,
client who said this question, I was like, Molly may not agree with this, but I can, I definitely do a fair bit of cleaning.
oh yeah, yeah. For the audience, Peter is amazing as far as a housekeeper goes. It's fantastic. My life is great. But nonetheless, I still do some stuff. It's not like I don't do anything. But making sure that not one person is ending up with the burden of all of like the household priorities. And we're actually very different because normally this is the kind of like, normally it's unfortunately the female in the partnership that tends to be the one that's doing most of the cleaning and cooking on top of working and training. And that's just kind of the status quo. But when you're both training for something big, it might be time to revisit the status quo and maybe have that frank discussion about who's doing what and what responsibilities can, even if it means you need to get a housekeeper in or.
Yeah, I had that same thought that maybe even just like even a short-term trial on that, right? Of if it is the housekeeping or, maybe even, I don't know about ordering food, but, the food service delivery things might be a solution in the short term. Just to get, especially in those key weeks, right? It might be just sometimes you have to do that. And some people have the means to do that and some don't. But sometimes that just helps those
take
little
some of the
things
pressure off. Yeah.
Daycare would be maybe another spend, right? And I mean, I think with some clients, I definitely like, we sometimes step back and it's like, well, rather than getting, the $12,000 bike, could we get the $6,000 bike and, spend on some of these other things that sometimes add up, right? And that could be, learning to skills stuff, right? Like I've had a few people who I've worked with, not as closely as I probably would have liked. And then, skill was a deficit and they go to something like Leadville and they get injured, right? So all the training they did and all the expensive bike wasn't the limiter, right? And I don't know if that makes sense in that brief of a description, but I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, and I think maybe just the last thing is we've talked about this just keeps coming back up, is the why. You both signed up for an event because you thought it would be fun to both do this event. So kind of keeping that at top of mind when you are hitting kind of difficult, like, irritation moments in your training together or your separate training or whatever, just remembering like, oh right, we're paying to do this, we opted to do this.
And I think when I'm thinking back, like I think on some level the goal wasn't just for me. I don't want this to sound sappy because it's not, but like it wouldn't have been a successful summer or trip or race if you had a crappy race. So I think like for me, and I mean, I was doing your training or designing your training, I should say, not doing your training.
That would have been really helpful, actually.
Just copying it straight on. That's how I do it. Although sometimes I do get excited about what clients have, and it's really tempting just to copy it into my own thing.
Oh, I just meant you were doing it for me. Like I was just not actually training.
Just uploading it in.
Yeah.
Like super impressed.
No, actually,
like,
side note, sorry. I'm using Peter's Garmin at this camp right now, and let me tell you, his virtual training partner is irritatingly faster than me, and it is making me so angry. So, pro tip.
You can adjust the speed of the that's not a smart Garmin, but I'll let you think it's me if that impresses you.
It does not. It makes me really grumpy. I think my virtual training partner is doping, but anyway.
Okay. I think you can turn the virtual partner off and it saves batteries too.
I need to. It's been really depressing.
Where was I? So anyhow, like it's a team effort, right? And so you can't just show up at the race, you got to do the training. So then all the training and all the preparation should be a team effort. So it's things that's, I think, where you have to, plan the days that one person's going long and the other person's like maybe doing a shorter workout or a double day or something. And they're going to do some of the pre-cooking or the whatever. Right. And for as the anal partner in the couple, which that's who I am, you sometimes need to accept that it's just, it's not going to be your perfect. So yeah. Dinner might not be 5 stars, but sometimes 3-star dinners, like we're just all eating rice and broccoli and chicken or something anyhow, right? Like it doesn't have to be super complicated. Yeah, I don't know if those are some ideas, but that's all I said. Do you want to move on to the second sort of phase of that, is how do you train together, like actually physically go out the door?
Yes, absolutely.
And so this one actually, the first aside is that this listener apparently has crashed while looking at their Garmin, which means Molly wins. From the previous Q&A, we were arguing about whether that was a real concern. So apparently it does happen. But his question, I would say this person's question, was more training with, so actually like riding, actually running with a spouse or partner who is also, training.
And training competitively, I'll add, not just like.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this relates to a lot of situations, right? Like when people start coaching, they sort of have this thing that everything has to be perfect, and they can't ever do group rides or ride with a friend, which is like, makes me so sad. But definitely sometimes you have to focus. And so it's really just aligning the focus days with the more fun, like lower key, less structured days. But you've written several articles, and then also we have a monopod. Some of our first episodes we did, Molly, or one of the first episodes we did, Molly had a episode where she talked right to this topic. So we'll link to that, but it's one of probably the first 5, I think we did.
I think so, yeah. And it's a short one. It's, I think, 15 minutes maybe.
Yeah. So do you want to give the people some examples of sort of solutions, or where did you want to go with that?
Yeah, I can kind of speak to this because I will admit, when Peter and I first started dating and stuff, I had a lot of stress around us riding together because obviously Peter is a much stronger rider than I am. So his easy rides are my much harder rides. And, that does not always make for a super fun day for me. It actually usually ends up with me being really irritable. So I think the first thing is actually both of you like knowing yourselves. So Peter really likes adventuring and kind of going off and like checking out this road or whatever, not necessarily knowing like how long it is or where it leads, and a ton of people are like that. I really like having a distance in mind and knowing how long I'm going to be out, how many kilometers I'm doing, how many meters I'm climbing. That kind of information is very important to me. So as a rule, I don't like riding when I don't know what my end point is. So knowing what kind of person you are as a rider is, really important, and kind of working with that. So now Peter, if we're going to ride together, wouldn't just be like, it's going to be adventure. We might be out for 4 to 8 hours. Who knows? Now he knows to, have a goal in mind. So
yeah, and that's maybe a really good takeaway for a couple, right? Like one of the people might be a little like, even it's usually the fitter person isn't so worried about it, right? So just maybe those aren't the days to have crazy adventures. And for me, like I am off my bike half the time, like hiking up through like jungle grass, right? And I've just come to realize that that's not enjoyable for many people other than me. So those are just not things I do with people, right? And that seems obvious, but we all have those things that we do, right? It could be surging, crazy, or sprints, or climbing really fast, right? And sometimes those just aren't the days for that. And, I think
getting your fiance lost in a field of pricker bushes the day before the wedding when she has a short wedding dress, for instance.
I don't know who did that. Was that a bike ride?
Yes, it was.
Oh, that was an amazing bike ride.
Oh my gosh.
We can't say where that was because I think that was maybe a little questionable if we should have been there.
Okay.
If the jungle grass didn't.
Not great. Next, so that this kind of leads into the next point of like, you just don't always have to ride together. Like it is perfectly acceptable to go do your own thing, even if you're on a cycling vacation together. You don't always have to be riding together. It's fine. A lot of the times we start rides together, or we meet up partway through the ride or something like that, and we finish a ride together.
I think for us, I like go in and I usually have like a workout, and I wouldn't say I'm as anal as I used to be about workouts, but definitely I like having my thing, and I go and I'll climb a hill or whatever. And then usually there's some sort of adventure or crazy section. But often we'll meet, and then ride home, right? So it's sort of, I guess, like my cool down. And then in that way, it's all sort of out of my system. But that tends to work pretty well, right? And then everyone's done what they want to, and then you sort of finish off.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also just the self-handicapping that you can do. You know, you can ride your mountain bike while I'm on my road bike, or, you know,
I don't think that's the term you meant, but I think everyone would, like, adding resistance, I guess. Is that what you mean?
You're
like,
self-handicapping.
I'm not going like, oh, Molly, I've been training so hard recently. I couldn't possibly. That's why I'm not keeping up.
No, that's like fake handicapping. I mean, you're going to self-limit yourself. Yeah. There's a lot of selves in that. Sorry. Wider tires, for example.
I guess don't optimize your fitness, I guess. Yeah. So like I run 32s usually, and like you can sit up, like you wouldn't use your drops if you're, you know, obviously like you wouldn't try and be aero. You would let the person draft if if it was opportune, but you don't necessarily have to, is also a nice thing to do.
Yeah. Oh, so I think one of the other things people don't do very often is actually maybe this drafting. I mean, the number of rides that we've done, especially, you know, in the beginning, where I would murder myself to stay next to you versus sitting in your draft. You know, because you're out riding together. You want to be able to talk and stuff. Like, that's great. But, you know, it's also a lot easier in the draft. So not being afraid to go sit in the draft and just kind of enjoy that, I think is super important.
Yeah, even for sections of the ride, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then my last thought that I had, we might actually end up having more. My last really, it kind of is sneaky, or it's one that you can discuss beforehand, would be to actually sync your cycling computer to your partner's heart rate monitor. Because if you are much stronger, it might not occur to you how hard someone is going and how hard they're working. But if you can actually see your partner's heart rate the whole time, you can appropriately adjust so that they're not dying.
Yeah, I do that. I don't know if we've done that often, but I definitely do it with some of the folks I coach, and sometimes it'll be because we're going to do intervals while we're riding, and so it's sort of like motor pacing or like self-guided, but it definitely gives you a little bit of perspective on what's going on in someone, right? And you obviously have to have some idea of like what sort of state they're in, as far, or not state, but what their max heart rate would be in this case, or if you're using power, what is a relative hard power for them.
I do have one more thing. Don't be that guy, the one that like gets to the top of a climb, sits and waits, has a snack, whatever, and then when your partner crests the hill, like probably a little dejected, probably a little out of breath, probably also would like to stop and, you know, take in the scenery and have some water. Don't just start pedaling again. Let her stop too. Come on.
Let them stop too.
Let them stop too. I've yelled at so many people on mountain bike trails because I've seen their partners, and this is actually men and women, like partner is like minutes back, like crying. And, you know, as soon as they get caught up, the other person just hits the gas and just goes, and the person just gets this look of just utter despair. And it's kind of heartbreaking because you're like, wow, that person is never going to want to ride with that guy again.
Yeah. And I think that like mountain biking or like really hilly routes are obviously going to be harder, right? Because you're starting to get into some other variables for sure. But I mean, if the person you want to ride with is actually really good technically, you know, that could be a way, like a fit road rider could ride with someone who's a less fit but mountain biker and is really good, and that may level the playing field really nicely, right?
Oh, and I will say the other, last thing this time, I swear, is if you want to ride with your partner and you don't want to annoy her or him, and you're aware that you're much stronger, you know what? Go out and do an hour or 2 hour loop before you ride. Like, get up earlier. Go out for part of your ride first, and then go do the ride. That way you're a little bit tired. You've kind of already done whatever work you needed to do, and you can go on this long ride kind of already a quart low, and you'll probably be a little more evenly matched and have a good time.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would add is, so there's our motor pacing example, but there's also, I think, something I've learned as well is like it's also okay to just go easier sometimes and just let it be easy, and don't look at like if you're the stronger person, just like, and a lot of times when we ride together, especially those like rides where we're sort of going home, like I try and just let you ride, and like if there's a car coming, I'll actually go behind you and then sort of come back up beside you, and then that way your ride is sort of like not like you're not spiking to like go behind and come back and whatever.
Here I thought that was because I'm so strong.
I want to make a comment about riding behind you, but that's fine. No, but then that way, like it's not always about the like trying to hold on to the wheel of the faster person, right? And I think that's fine. And I mean, sometimes I'll like work on just pedaling fast. Like I'll just do some higher cadence work. Again, sit up a little bit more if you need to is another thing. I hesitate to say anything about fueling because if you're dealing with spouses, it's probably good to be fueled and not get into some sort of hypoglycemic state where you're going to be hangry.
Flip side, similar to never asking a woman if she's on her period, you probably don't want to ask if she's been eating and drinking enough. Like maybe just mention that you're realizing you haven't been eating or drinking enough, whether you're, again, male or female or whatever. No one really likes someone being like, oh, seems like you haven't been drinking enough. It's very irritating.
This coming from someone who doesn't eat or drink much at all.
Yes, exactly. But if you were to say like, oh man, I just realized I haven't been drinking, I will take that information and be like, oh yeah, me neither, I should drink more. But if you're like, have you been drinking? I'm gonna snap at you and tell you, yes, I have, obviously. Can't you tell from my 2 full bottles that I've been drinking plenty?
I guess that's a good social tool or social, I don't know what that would be, technique.
It's EQ, higher EQ.
Yes, I have very low social EQ. But it does segue into what was our sort of third area. So do you want to go to that one? I
think that's a good one, yeah.
The note of fueling and training of the gut. So the question is, can you train your gut? And by this, there's sort of a few ways to look at training of the gut. So this is sort of our fueling, right? So I think there's the high, like extreme or elite version is sort of, you can read it. There's some studies and research that are sort of around right now about training the gut to use more carbohydrate, when you're doing an Ironman or something like that. So rather than sort of that, what is it usually, like 200 calories or 50 grams of carbohydrate, it's sort of like that's sort of the common recommendation, but you're seeing some of these elite athletes pushing up to like 90 grams an hour, plus or minus. And so the idea that you're training your gut to use more, and it seems like that's very possible. But I think the more important thing for a lot of us is to actually just practice eating. So the skill of eating, pulling something out of your pocket, the regularity of doing that, and then just the what comes with that, which you can maybe touch on, Molly, is just the like feeling of fullness, while you're riding, right? It's sort of odd if you're used to doing hour rides or something and not eating.
Yeah, I always say whenever I'm giving a nutrition talk, like the perfect amount of fullness, like you did a ride right when you come in the door and you don't feel the need to stick your head in the refrigerator and eat everything in sight. You should get in feeling like, oh, maybe I could eat whatever, but you're not starving. And most people, and I mean, I can say this having, we've been at a lot of camps, most people finish rides and immediately head for food, which usually is an indicator that they've not eaten enough in the ride itself. These camps are always good for me. As Peter said, I do not eat or drink enough. As a general rule, but when I'm at a camp as a coach, it's the one time that I can't be the cracked or bonky rider. So I am suddenly an eating fiend on the bike. Definitely more than I ever eat normally.
And so ideally, you would be training more ahead of a camp. We don't want these camps to be huge, bumps in your training load, right? Because it increases our risk of injury and illness and everything else. So what would go along with that preparation is then that you're also, we could say, training the gut, but also you're just getting used to fueling, right? So what do you carry? What kind of food do you like? Do you like solids or more liquid? What works at what intensity? And all these factors. And then just the actual feeling of putting a Cliff Bar in your mouth every hour. It's a lot of food, but we know that in these longer events, especially, or in the case of Molly's, you're gone for 2 weeks here doing, 5-hour rides. There's just at some point you'll see it, right? Like the people that sort of get through and survive day 1 and 2, they think they're doing okay, but you'll see it, right? In day 3, 4, 5, 6, those people just have nothing. Like they're just drained, right?
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of the gameplay, it's also important to point out, I know a lot of pros and a lot of racers and riders who eat real food when they're on the bike training. And then they shift to, more of a gel or sports drink type thing when they race. And I generally think that's a great thing. I'm all about whole food on the bike. But if you are going to try to do a race, you do need to practice fueling with the fuel that you're going to be eating on race day. Your stomach is going to process gels a lot differently than it's going to maybe process a peanut butter sandwich. So training your gut for the actual fuel that you're planning on using is super important. The amount of people who end up, in the porta potty or throwing up on the side of the road because the gels are just not going down very well at some of these events, it's pretty high.
Yeah, and I don't know how much, to me, the solids are going to be generally more difficult to digest. And I wonder how many of those people struggle with the actual gel, or if it's that they're not, in the excitement of racing, maybe their gut is a little different when they're going hard, or B, are they just not drinking any water?
But you need to know how much you need to drink, and you need to know how that gel is going to taste and stuff. Because, honestly, even the consistency and everything like that, gels kind of take some getting used to. So your first time using it shouldn't be on race day.
100% agree. Yeah, I guess I'm really arguing semantics here of whether it's the gel's fault or whether it's the user's fault for not drinking while they race. But yeah, it's definitely, when you're doing, again, this isn't year round. I think all this stuff should be periodized, really, right? Once you're in that early base, you probably don't need to eat much. And then as the volume comes up, you can sort of bring your peanut butter sandwich and your bananas with you. And then as you start, late base build, you can start adding in some gels when you're actually doing some of those high octane, sprint workouts and VO2 stuff and stuff like that, and getting ready for racing. That should be a few times a week, 1 to 3, probably 1 to 3 interval sessions a week, where you're trying to keep that sugar in, because we know that that's going to increase the performance. Even just the perception of that sugar in your mouth is going to increase that performance. So we want that training to be high quality. We want the recovery to be high quality. And then we're also just training. I like to think of it more the skill of eating, drinking, and then that digestion as being sort of a secondary concern, which is a concern, but I think secondary for a lot of people to the actual, put the water in, put the food in.
Yeah, and I think maybe the last thing to mention about this is one of the questions within this was asking, should I eat a big meal before I train, or is that a way to, get the gut ready? I don't think that's necessarily the way, but the timing of when you do some of your training rides, if you're doing a race that's going to start at 8 a.m., I do think you should probably at least try to do some rides where you get up, you eat breakfast, and you basically gameplay getting out the door for an 8 a.m. start. That way you know how your breakfast food sits in your stomach, eat what you're going to eat on race day for breakfast. I think a lot of people kind of make that mistake, and, night before the race, they're like, oh crap, what do I eat tomorrow morning? Because, they're used to training later, after work. So they're used to, whatever they normally have for breakfast, and then not training for 9 hours. And then suddenly it's, oh, wait, I need to get out the door immediately after I eat breakfast and race.
Yeah, and I think there is an element more for running, I think, where there actually is, and I'll put the link for this in the show notes, but if you're running, especially, I think there is a little bit where you can sort of overload the gut a bit, almost put weight in your gut, so that when you run, then it might stress the gut more than it might even on race day, and then your gut gets better at just handling having something in it while you run.
Pro tip on that: if you try this, please make sure there's a porta potty or a McDonald's or something within a couple kilometers of your starting point.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. But I think there's some good logic. Again, I don't think we need to even go down the sciencey part of it. I think just, have a bit of water one time and then a bit more water and then build up a little bit if, that's going to help your fueling in a longer event. I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that's good.
that's all I really had to say.
Yeah, no, I think that pretty much covers all of it. And make sure as you're training your gut that includes drinking as much as you're eating, or an appropriate amount to what you're eating.
Yeah, I think that it really just gets back to like what are you going to do on race day, and then just practice that, right? Like in all senses. So you talked about wake up time, meal time, eating on the bike, gear on the bike, like pace on the bike. Um, and that's definitely not year round, but that's sort of what you want to be thinking about for sure. And then you won't hopefully be that nervous.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to our last question. And this is definitely more for you here. Do you get to add time to indoor workouts to compensate for it being more efficient than outdoors? So first of all, maybe explain where this question is coming from.
Yeah, I haven't heard this for a while, but like I think, and I can't find the reference because I don't think I think I might have thrown or burnt the book, but there's I think it was like an old CTS thing, but I'm sure there's other sources for it where if you rode indoors, you would ride less time. So it was like 45 minutes equaled an hour outside. Does that make sense?
It does in theory, but I will strenuously argue it like in actuality. But continue.
Well, and then so they had like swimming was actually less, and then running I think was like similar to that, like riding inside. So say 45 minutes of running equaled an hour of biking, and I think that's now essentially been like it was just odd. It never made sense even when I was started, but I'm sure there was a good thought to it, and I think a lot of it was trying to get towards training stress. So now we have TSS score. Which is maybe beyond this discussion, but like we've just sort of moved beyond that, and we have ways of quantifying the volume and the intensity and the load. So I don't think that it would necessarily be worth it. I think it would be worth just being careful with how long you spend inside, and mixing up sort of what you're paying attention to, which I think we've talked about. Mixing up your mode. We're here at the Consummate Athlete, so I mean certainly getting swimming, getting running, fat biking outside, biking on your trainer with some focus. I think that all makes sense, but yeah, I have never bothered like accounting, like trying to do like a multiplier factor or something just because someone's inside. I think if anything, what you would see again from a training stress score, so if you were putting power, heart rate into the system, you would see that you're not coasting as much, you're not stopping on the side of the trail, so you should have a more efficient ride, so your heart rate will be higher for that hour versus if maybe you were out mountain biking or something. So I think in that sense that would be reflected by the efficiency of an indoor ride.
Yeah, I guess there's no downhills in an indoor ride.
Right, and that's what they were. I think ultimately, like I don't believe I own the book anymore for assorted reasons, but I think it got down to like there was no coasting and there was no downhills, and so you just like the load was always on your legs, which is true, but I mean that's great, right?
Yeah, I'm just not really sure with this question, kind of what the correct answer is. I think maybe the only mistake I think people maybe make is like if they have a, say 6-hour outdoor ride, how do they turn that into a trainer ride? That might be a better question, or like a more pointed question.
No, I think that's a great way of looking at it. I think you're exactly right.
Yes.
And so I think periodization is the example, and not following. I'm trying to think back if we were talking about this on this podcast or not. I think that was when I was on the Canadian Cycling podcast. We're not in the Pro Tour, and so you just need to embrace what you can do. Like it's just really like a block periodization where you're indoors, so work on your coordination and your one leg and some focused intervals, and then go. Hopefully, you can cross country ski or run or whatever you do for cross train.
But you probably wouldn't tell someone to like take that 6 hours that they were supposed to ride outside and put that 6 hours onto the trainer. Like that would just be terrible.
I put a cap of 90 minutes usually, and there's exceptions. Like I do have people that are not necessarily pro tour but quite elite, and for some of them we'll certainly sprinkle that in. And we'll certainly do things like ride for an hour, run for 45, ride for an hour, and mix it up. We'll mix like 90 minutes freezing outside on your bike and then come in and finish another 90 on the trainer. So there's ways of like tweaking that, but those like 4 hour slugfest on the trainer, like I'll do it occasionally. Like if I was getting ready to go to California, I'd maybe do 1 or 2 in the week to 10 days before I went down. But again, like for most people, it's just that energy, that mental energy, and is just it's not worth it, I don't think.
Yeah, definitely. Having done a couple of those back in my first original Ironman days, would not do again.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, like, you can just do that, those big hours, as the days the weather gets better. Go out on your cross country skis. You can, in March, you can go away. Some people are doing little camps.
Diminishing returns.
I think that's exactly it. And I think, again, that motivation, like, it's too often you see those people, like, it's classic quote unquote zone 2 workout. And there's just no speed ever. Like, the speed just gets lost. So I'd much rather see someone working on their cadence, like doing some big cadence blocks, some super good focus with that. Maybe mixing in some sweet spot, so that you're getting the most bang for your buck. And then, some 90-minute just sort of endurance rides, I think, are great.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. And of course, as always, if you have more questions, hit us up on consummateathlete.com. There's a forum on there, or you can find us on Instagram or Twitter at Peter Glassford and at Molly J. Herford. Like we said, we have some cool events coming up, so check the show notes for all the links that we mentioned before. And of course, if you could head over to iTunes and rate and review, we would be forever grateful. Thanks so much for tuning into the Consummate Athlete podcast. You can check out my stuff over at theoutdooredit.com or by following me on Instagram and Twitter at Molly J. Herford. And you can check out Peter's coaching, training plans, blogs, all that fun stuff over at smartathlete.ca or by following him on Twitter and Instagram at Peter Glassford. And if you want to support this show and other awesome podcasts, please check out wideanglepodium.com for show info, other podcasts, bonus content, and to become a donating member so you can get all of that rad behind-the-scenes content and help keep shows like this on the air. And lastly, if you're enjoying this podcast and all the information that we're bringing to you every single week, do us a solid and pop into iTunes to leave us a rating and review. It takes you about 2 seconds. You can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone, and it really helps us out. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week.